back. I'm finally getting around to doing this video. I've been kind of holding it off. I don't know. I understand that people will have their own thoughts, opinions about it. I'm not one to shy away from controversial topics, discussions. At the same time, I do understand that it can be sensitive for a lot of people. So I do understand that. At the same time, I can't allow it to stop me from, sharing truth and sharing the light with others, because I know people have a lot of questions, especially those in the military still, or those who were once in the military. Me personally, I had a lot of questions that kind of went unanswered, to be honest with you. So I just hope that, as we dive into this video, it answers some questions that maybe you've had, or maybe questions you didn't even think about. So let's get into it. Okay, y'all, so first things first, just because an organization or somebody says that they represent God doesn't mean that they're talking about Jesus Christ. This is the exact reason why we're supposed to test every spirit. Satan masquerades as an angel of light. He is here to deceive you. Just because it looks good on the surface doesn't mean that it is of God. Many times, many of us believers feel like if something says God on there, or God's name is slapped onto something, it's like, oh, okay, it must be of God then. No, that's Satan's whole goal, is to deceive you. Also need to realize that Satan tries to be like the Most High. He is going to copy the Most High. This is why Satan likes to push out a counterfeit version of what God had already put in place. And one of the things that Satan tries to, mock God in is creating an army. Yes, God had an army in the Bible, in his word, in the Old Testament. But it's key to know who was that army, consisting of. The Israelites. So if you're not an Israelite, what are you doing in an actual army? But that's besides the point. So yes, I'm completely aware that God had his own army. And yeah, y'all think about it. In the end times, when Satan and God hash it out, Satan needs an army to go against God's army. So it becomes a question of, whose army are you serving in? Is it Satan's army, or is it God's army? But you know what? I get it. It's not always easy to determine if something is of Satan or something is of God. I mean, well, sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's not. I get that. And another thing that the enemy uses to show if something is of him is through the use of symbolism, because symbolism transcends language. So y'all remember the Tower of Babel, right? How everybody worked together. They spoke the same language in order to build this tower to ascend into the heavens, to be like God, or to rebel against him. And God, struck them down, confused their language. That's how the enemy uses symbolism, because symbolism, again, transcends language. So you don't need to understand what everybody is saying to understand the message that is being conveyed through the symbol. And this is no different when it comes to the military. But of course, some background. So y'all remember the Israelites, right? God, Yahweh, delivered them out of Egypt, out of slavery, out of oppression. So they went into the wilderness, right? And God gave them commandments. And one of the the first commandment was, thou shalt have no other gods before me. And I got my Bible out today, y'all. So in Deuteronomy 5:7, it reads, you shall have no other gods before me. Okay, seems simple enough, right? And the funny thing is that sometimes when God gives us commandments, we think it's just rules. And the reality is, it's not just rules. He's not just giving it to us because he felt like it. He's giving us these commandments to essentially protect us. And that's exactly what he wanted to do with the Israelites, because, again, God, all knowing, knew what these other nations did to worship their gods. But don't take my word for it. So let's see what God has to say about that. So in Deuteronomy 12:29 through 31, it reads, when the Lord your God cuts off from before you the nations which you go to dispossess, and you displace them and dwell in their land, take heed to yourself that you are not ensnared to follow them after they are destroyed from before you, and that you do not inquire after their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? I also will do likewise. You shall not worship the Lord your God in that way, for every abomination to the Lord which he hates, they have done to their gods, for they burn even their sons and daughters in the fire to their gods. So God straight up said in his word that these other nations were burning their sons and daughters. They were sacrificing their sons and daughters in order to worship their gods. And think about it, y'all. Israel wasn't the only nation roaming around, on earth back then. There were other nations. The Egyptians was one of them. And these other nations did not know Yahweh. They didn't know God. They had their own gods and goddesses that they worshiped and attributed their success to. When you do a further research into that, it really just comes down to they worship Satan. Because at the end of the day, is God versus Satan, good versus evil. So these other nations worshiped other gods. And God didn't want Israel to go into these lands and to start doing the same thing that these other nations were doing, to worship him. But of course, if you know how the story goes with Israel, they went into these lands and they took on the customs and mindsets of these other nations, and they ended up doing exactly what these other nations were doing. Israel even ended up sacrificing their own, sons and daughters to the gods of these other nations. So they fell into continual disobedience against God. And, so Israel ended up following the ways of the Gentiles, of these other nations. And all throughout history, Israel has, followed the ways of these other nations. And these other nations included the Greeks, because the Greeks were pagans. And of course, another pagan nation they followed were the Romans. And the Romans believed in multiple gods and goddesses as well. They weren't exempt from that. They believed in Mars, Jupiter, Apollo, Neptune, just to name a few. And the thing about Roman culture is that the US military is heavily, heavily influenced by it. And the Romans were not exempt from how they, appeased the gods and goddesses that they worship. Another thing is that back then, well, even today, Roman officials, military officials, took oaths. So think about it. If the Romans were a pagan nation and they worshipped, gods and goddesses, and when they took an oath, an oath is a spiritual covenant, right? Who are they taking an oath to? But the biggest thing is that this, influence Roman culture is displayed through symbolism today. And again, Satan always has to reveal himself. So I wanted to show y'all or walk y'all through how this information was revealed to me. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is type in cmohs.org. And that's the Congressional Medal of Honor Society's official website. It's a legit site. I didn't make it up in my room. So you're going to go on this website, and then on the right, you're going to click on the 3 bars and scroll down to where it says the medal and then design. So click on that. And then the first thing that's going to pop up is the Army Medal of Honor. And it says, presently there are 3 variations of the Medal of Honor. Steeped with symbolism, the medal has become a historic symbol of our nation's bravest. Out of respect for those who have earned it, its appearance has remained largely unaltered in over 150 years. So straight off the bat, they talked about symbolism, right? And when we click in the middle, we have Minerva. A simple profile of Minerva, the helmeted goddess of wisdom and war, rests in the center of the medal. And as we know, Minerva was a Roman goddess, and the God of the Hebrews said to not have any other gods before him. And we must remember that Romans were pagans. They were a polytheistic nation. And yes, I understand that some Romans back then became followers of Christ, after they accepted him as their Lord and Savior, which is how we even get the term Christian, but I digress. So I understand that, but the Roman nation's foundation was paganism. This is why God tells us to be set apart, and also members of the early church were not a part of the Roman military. So that's just something to keep in mind. But the next thing we're going to do is click on the triangular shape, and it's going to pop up with oak clusters. And it reads, dark green oak clusters located in each of the star's 5 points represent strength. So one thing that many people will probably overlook is the fact that this is a 5-pointed figure. The proper term for this is actually not a star, but a pentagram. Pent meaning 5. So the next thing that we want to do is, okay, look up the definition of pentagram. So we're going to type in pentagram definition, and it's going to pop up, and it reads, a 5-pointed star that is formed by drawing a continuous line in the 5 straight segments, often used as a mystic and magical symbol. So let's look at Merriam-Webster Dictionary's definition of what it is. A figure of a 5-pointed star, usually made with alternate points, connected by a continuous line, and used as a magic or occult symbol. So, one thing that should stick out to all believers is the fact that it's used as a magic symbol. So in Deuteronomy 18:10 to be exact, God forbids the use of magic, right? So this symbol is being used in magic, and that's forbidden. And it's forbidden because, this type of power isn't from the Most High. It's from Satan. Satan has power, and, not as much as God, of course, but he does have power. So we don't want to underestimate him. But another thing about this symbol is that if you look closely, you'll realize it's actually an inverted pentagram. And all you have to do is Google inverted pentagram and click images. And I feel like it's self-explanatory at this point. It's shaped with the head of the Baphomet, or i.e. the goat of Mendes. And I truly feel like it doesn't need a deeper explanation. Satanists use this symbol even for their Bible. I don't even feel like I should be calling it a Bible, but for their book, they use this symbol on the front of their book. And just to show that, I'm not biased, I'll point out the Air Force symbol. And I actually saw the Air Force medal first. Because, Air Force. And I found this when I was in the military, but I felt like the Army's symbolism was just easier to read. But anywho, so, the same thing goes with the Air Force. But in the middle, it has Lady Liberty that derives from Queen Semiramis. And if you know who Nimrod is, Tower of Babel, Babylon, then you know Queen Semiramis. Both Semiramis and Nimrod were in rebellion against God. And I just wanted to reiterate, symbolism is a tactic that the enemy uses to reveal himself. So if he's revealing himself through this symbolism, in this organization, then you have to ask yourself, what is the organization, standing for? Who are you serving in the organization? So I just want y'all to keep that in mind. So after discovering this information, honestly, for me, it was kind of obvious to me because at this point I had already decided to get out of the military as a conscientious objector. But I did ask myself a few questions. One, if the Medal of Honor is the highest achieving medal that you can receive in the military, and it represents everything that goes against God, the God that I serve, and his word, what does that say about the organization itself? And another thing I was asking myself, I had to take an oath to get into the military. So who am I taking the oath to? Because it can't be Jesus Christ if the highest achieving medal is something that goes against him. Like, it just didn't make any sense. It was just a complete contradiction to me. And honestly, this information was a bit overwhelming at first because, it's the Medal of Honor. I know people haven't even received the medal because they weren't alive to actually receive it, so I understand what we, look at the medal as. I get that. But again, it's kind of in plain sight too. So I felt some type of way. It just made me think about how God said in his word, in Hosea, that my people perish for a lack of knowledge. And Satan doesn't play fair. That's the thing about Satan. He doesn't play fair, and he wants to deceive you. By no means am I shocked how there are many believers who are in the military who are being deceived, straight up. And we can all like dwell on how we've been deceived and this, that, and the third, but the main thing, and I guess the blessing in it all, is that God is revealing this to us so we can do something about it. Repent, turn away from your sin, right? It's easier said than done. I get that. I am not here to tell you what you should and what you should not do. That is truly between you and Jesus Christ. I have no power to tell you what you should and shouldn't do. That is something you're going to have a conversation with God about, because no matter which way you go, it is a very hard decision to make. But if you're watching this video, that means that there is still time for you. So I hope this video was informative. I hope it answered some questions. I know it answered some questions for me. And, I'll leave the comments open. If you have any questions, just, hit me up, let me know. And I hope you guys enjoyed.